Hello everyone, welcome back to another live stream from On Your Game Physiotherapy. I'm Elliot and I'm going to be doing a live stream today on building new habits and setting SMART goals. So again, you might question what a SMART goal is. That's exactly what I'm going to run through today, and it's the best way to kind of approach when you're trying to build a new goal, when you're trying to build a new habit, because again, we're at that time of year where people set New Year's resolutions and set new goals for the new year to get into. So I'll give it a couple minutes for everyone to sort of come in. Any questions throughout, please let me know. But as I said, we'll be discussing building habits and setting goals today. So I'll give it a couple of seconds just to get started. Perfect. So as I said, when we're coming into the new year, it's very common for people to want to get New Year's resolutions, set new goals, build new habits for the start of the year. And it's not a bad thing that you're setting a New Year's resolution. It's a great thing that you have the want to have set goals. But as I said, if the only reason why you want to set that goal is because the New Year's coming, then it's going to be quite difficult to maintain that. Again, you must have to really want to change. You must have to really want what you're trying to achieve, rather than sort of just having it that it's the new year start and you want to try something new. Again, it's a good reason to do it, but you must still want to achieve that goal rather than it just sort of being a day in the calendar. And again, I'm going to discuss a little bit more about that today and how to maintain goals, because again, it's very common for people, even myself, to set a goal and sort of say it without having sort of specifics to it. Again, that's why I'm going to mention about SMART goals. And then you might stick to it for a week or 2 weeks, but then the discipline, the motivation starts to reduce a little bit. You start to not be doing your goal as much, doing your habit as much, and it can start to fall off a bit. So again, we're going to discuss some techniques to work on that, to build on that. And when you're setting your goal, really being able to fine tune that to yourself. And again, that's why I'll just explain a little bit about what SMART goals are today. So again, we'll start from the beginning. So I want to discuss a little bit more about discipline versus motivation. So motivation is something that we don't always have. It's really good when you're feeling motivated, you feel like you can do loads of things, you feel like you can conquer the world. But again, that motivation is just not always there. It's something that we can't necessarily control. Things might happen that might reduce our motivation, things might happen which might boost our motivation. But again, it's not a constant thing that we have. And that's where discipline comes into place. So in terms of motivation, there are a lot of ways to get yourself motivated, which we will discuss today. But again, sometimes there's going to be days where a lot of the days you're not going to feel motivated, and there's got to be something else which is going to drive you towards showing up at the gym, showing up at wherever it is that you're trying to achieve, or whatever it is you're trying to achieve. So again, when it comes to discipline is when you stick to something even when you're not motivated, or something's happened, or things have happened that are out of your control. That discipline is what keeps you showing up, keeps you turning up. And again, it's good to just know and distinguish between both of them, because there are going to be days when you're not motivated. So having that discipline to show up, get through it, and then you'll feel better for it after. Again, doing that repetitively. So the more and more that you turn up and you show up and you participate in the goal you're trying to achieve, you participate in this new habit, on the days that you're not feeling motivated, next time you're not feeling motivated, then you're going to be more likely to show up, because you've got that discipline and you're building that mental resilience to keep showing up even when things are challenging, times are rough, and you might not have that motivation to go. So again, just a little bit of a contrast between what discipline is versus motivation, and something to be aware of when you're setting your goals. So in terms of goal setting, I like to split it up between short-term goals and long-term goals. Again, both of them, it's really important for them to be smart. So for example, a short-term goal, you want to be looking at sort of 6 weeks. Again, the time frame doesn't really matter, but you don't want it to be too short and you don't want it to be too long. So again, the short-term goal is going to be a stepping stone to the long-term goal that you have. So again, short-term goals usually around 6 weeks, doesn't have to be specifically that time frame. Long-term goals around 6 months. So again, doesn't have to be that time frame. It could be 6 months, it could be a year, it could be in between that. But again, you don't want it to be 5 years down the line. You can do that if you want to, but again, it's important to have little goals in between that. But again, you don't want it to be too short, you don't want it to be long. So in terms of short-term goals, you don't want it to be something that's going to be too challenging where you're not going to be able to reach it, but you don't want it to be something that's too easy where it doesn't really feel that difficult for you to reach that goal, because then again, it's going to be more difficult to reward yourself and feel the benefits of what you've achieved. So again, setting the short-term goals and setting the long-term goals are really important. So again, if you've got, for example, a 6-month period and you set 4 short-term goals in between that before reaching the 6-month period, then again, you're going to be more likely to stick to that, because you've got the little mini wins each sort of frame of goal and each frame of short-term goal to reach that end phase. So when it comes to sort of goal setting, we've got these now short-term goals and we've got these long-term goals, but what we want them to be is SMART. And what SMART stands for is an acronym. So essentially it means, we'll start with specific. So the S in SMART means specificity, and the goal being specific to what you want to achieve. So again, if for example you're trying to excel in a sport, we'll use examples for this as well to make it a little bit clearer. If you're trying to excel in a sport, we'll use a marathon for example. If your goal is something separate to what's going to benefit that marathon, say for example the long-term goal is to run a marathon, that's not really a SMART goal, because it's just one thing and it doesn't allow us to have the utensils and the tools to build up to that goal essentially. So again, we want it to be nice and specific. So again, if your goal is to run a marathon, you want to have things that are going to build up to that, leading up to the long-term goal of running that marathon. Again, it needs to be specific to that sport. So if you've got many short-term goals that are running certain distances with certain times, that's really important to sort of measure, because again, it's specific to what you're trying to achieve. We're not veering off course and trying to improve something separate to your goal. Again, it's okay to have multiple goals in different areas, but when you're streamlining and trying to achieve one certain goal, it's important to sort of stick to that and make it nice and specific so that our training can match what we're trying to achieve. And again, the way we train and the things that we do building up to sort of an event or a long-term goal, the things that we do in between that, the way that we train will elicit certain results. So again, we want it to be specific to what we're doing so that our goals are going to be reached and our goals are going to be really streamlined to achieve that. So again, that's number one, which is being specific with our goals. So being measurable is the second one. So we've done S, now we're on M. So we want our goals to be measurable. We want to be able to measure our progress. So again, if we're using the marathon, for example, or we're wanting to improve our running distance and time, we want to be able to measure that. So again, if you're sort of training for a certain time and a certain distance on a run, again, we want to be able to measure that each week, and writing that down can be really beneficial, because then again, it's them little wins that you're ticking off each time. Say for example, 1 week in your training, you do an 8-mile run in a certain time. You write it down, you've tracked that, you've measured your numbers and you measured your metrics. And then again, that's something that you can look to continuously progress, because if we're not measuring what we're doing as we're doing it, it's going to be more difficult, 1, to stick to that goal, and 2, it's going to be harder to track your progress and make sure that you're making progress. And again, our main aim is to reach that long-term goal. So being able to measure it is really important to get the right outcomes, essentially. And again, you've got to find the best measures that work for you. So again, we're using a marathon, for example. Distance and time is probably the main one people might go for, but again, find the metric which works best for you. If your goal is to not run the marathon quickly and in a certain distance, and it's more so about how you feel, then allow that to be what you measure with that. But again, it can be anything, as long as it's something that you can track, you can monitor, and again, it's good for them short-term wins and building that up. So again, we've done S, we've done M. Next, what we're going to go on to is A. So that will be achievable. So again, we want it to be attainable, but we don't want it to be impossible to achieve. So again, if you're setting a goal to set the world record in the marathon, again, for some people that might be what they're striving towards, but again, you don't want it to be an impossible, unrealistic sort of goal. And again, that works with the short-term goals and the long-term goals. For example, if you've got a short-term goal that's impossible to achieve, it's really, really, really difficult. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't reach high and aim high, but again, if your short-term goals are really, really challenging and impossible to achieve, once you get to that 6-week point, for example, and you realize you haven't achieved that yet, it can put you down, it can unmotivate you, and again, it can make you more likely to fall off that goal and what you're trying to achieve. But again, making it achievable is really important. But again, we don't want it to be too easy, we don't want it to be too difficult. And similarly, the next one is realistic. So it needs to be realistic and relevant to what you're trying to achieve. So again, similar to being achievable. We don't want it to be too hard, but we don't want it to be too easy. We want it to be realistic. So again, think about previously certain, if we're using the marathon again, for example, or running, for example, think about what you've achieved before, what times you've achieved before, what distances you've achieved before. That way it can give you a little bit of a metric of what you want to work towards. And again, these numbers are really important to make sure you're measuring, tracking your progress to allow yourself to reach that long-term goal. And finally, you want it to be timed. So again, I've already mentioned this a little bit, but you want it to be a 6-week period, you want it to be a 6-month period. That way you can really challenge yourself and progress in the right way, challenge yourself and progress accordingly. Because again, if you've got a short-term goal of 6 weeks, having that time frame to get it in is going to allow you to be more disciplined, it's going to allow you to be more motivated, because you'll want to strive to reach that. Again, if there's no time frame in place for it, it's going to be a lot easier to skip a day because there's no sort of pressure to achieve that in a certain time. But again, having a timed time SMART goal is really important. And again, that's kind of the acronym we want to work on. So again, when you're setting your goals, you want all of these metrics to be included in the goals, and you want to be able to work on that to reach your goals, essentially. So now we've explained a little bit about what SMART goals are and how to set SMART goals. What we're going to talk a little bit about now is how to maintain these good habits, how to build these good new habits and stick to them, essentially, because it's good that you're setting a goal and it's good that you're wanting to achieve something, but if you're not going to stick to it, then at the end of the day, there's not really much point if you're sort of only doing it for a week or two and then dropping off and then repeating the cycle over and over again. If you've got all the metrics in place from the start, you're going to be a lot more likely to stick to it and maintain it for a long period of time. So that's the first thing. We want exercise adherence. So being able to do this is you want to do something you enjoy. If the way you're training, you absolutely hate it and you're not enjoying it, every session you go to, you're fed up, you feel really, really sore after, you're battering yourself, you're not going to enjoy it that much. Again, for some people, they might enjoy doing that, but you want it to be individual and individualistic to yourself and to what you enjoy doing. So again, if your goals are something that you don't particularly enjoy, it's going to be very hard to stick to it. So again, if your long-term goal is something, again, as I said, something you're not really enjoying, but you know it's a good habit, building up to that, the short-term goals, make sure there are things that you, whilst being specific to your sport, make sure that you enjoy it and you're enjoying your training. Otherwise, again, it's going to be more difficult to stick to, essentially. So again, as I mentioned previously, it's really important to track your progress and measure objective outcomes, essentially. So look at it from a bigger perspective. Sometimes people track their daily progress rather than looking at a little bit more of a bigger perspective. Again, and having short-term goals allows you to keep monitoring that progress. So again, use objective measures, whether that's distance, time, any sort of sporting activity you're doing, points, goals scored, anything like that. As long as it's being tracked and monitored, that's really going to allow you to monitor how you're progressing and how things are moving forward. And again, sometimes looking at things from a weekly perspective is better than looking at it from a daily perspective. Pardon me. Because again, when we're training, when we're progressing, it's very difficult to see massive changes in a day. So say, for example, on Monday, you're training, you're striving towards your goal. The next day, you're not going to have seen drastic changes. No matter what you're really doing, it's going to be hard to see big changes in that short period of time. So again, looking at it over a week's period and then measuring the average over that week is going to be more beneficial for you, for some people, than looking at it daily. Again, some people prefer doing it daily, but if you're struggling to stick to that goal, changing it and looking over a week's perspective, 2 weeks perspective, 3 weeks perspective, and then going back in a month's time and seeing the change you've made from the day 1 you started to day 30 and seeing how big of a change that is, that can be really good for your self-esteem and help with that motivation, because sometimes it's hard to think that you're progressing that much when it's only been a short period of time. It's good to look at it from the bigger picture and see how things are progressing overall, essentially. Next, what we're going to be talking about is accountability. So again, you want to be able to hold yourself accountable, because there's not going to be times where someone's looking out for you, someone's helping you. Sometimes you're going to be by yourself and you're going to have to hold yourself accountable and have to go and do it yourself, essentially. So again, in order to hold yourself accountable, a good way of doing this is having a routine, having a diary with your new habits that are scheduled in. So that way you're less likely to skip it. Again, doing this, having it in your calendar each time again, it makes you more likely to want to stick to it. And that's how you can hold yourself accountable for that. And for example, say for one day you skip the gym, or you skip your hobby, or you skip the activity that is going to help you towards your goal. Holding yourself accountable and understanding that this is not going to be as beneficial towards my goal, whether that's long term or short term, and being able to get back to it next time and really strive to still trying to reach that. But again, having a routine, having a diary where it's scheduled in weeks in advance. Again, some people don't know their schedules, but as long as it's a good time frame in advance, just so you know exactly what you're doing and you haven't got to make decisions about what you're doing at that time. But again, another way of holding yourself accountable is having a friend or sort of a peer to do this new habit with. And that can really help you stick with it. So again, say for example, you've both got in your calendar that we'll use the gym, for example. You're trying to go to the gym 4 or 5 times per week in the new year, and you're trying to maintain that for a long period of time. So for example, if you've got a friend that you're both trying to get involved in the gym, you've both got similar sort of goals, what you want to do again is hold each other accountable. So say for example, you're both meant to be going on a day, you're less likely to skip it if you've got someone going with you, because that way, again, you might feel like you're letting them down, or you've got them to motivate you to help boost your motivation as you're going to the gym. Again, having a friend there, one, it might help make you enjoy it a little bit more, and two, it just helps you stick to the plan a little bit better. Next one we're going to talk about, again, I've touched on this briefly, but it's going to be about adjusting and adapting when necessary. So again, some things are out of our control. Some days we're not going to be able to do what we want to do in terms of what's going to be the most beneficial for reaching our goals. But again, preparing for this and anticipating this is really important, and having a plan for when this happens. So again, say for example, one night you've been stuck at work for an extra 3 hours and you're not able to go to the gym that day. Understand that, again, this is okay because it's out of our control. There's nothing we can do about having to stay in work for that period of time, or having to look after your kids or anything like that. Anything that's out of our control in that situation. Understand that that's completely normal. And again, just being able to adapt when necessary. So say, for example, you couldn't go on one day, just adding that in on the next day or another day where you're free and you can move towards that goal. That's going to be beneficial for you. Again, sometimes these things happen where we can't control it, but just having a plan for when that does happen can be really helpful. So next, again, touched on this briefly already, but having support. So friends, family, peers. It doesn't even have to be that they're attending the gym with you. It doesn't have to be that they're sticking to this habit with you, but having that support from friends and family and having that recognition of what you're doing can be really beneficial moving forward. Again, what you want to do is just make sure that you're being able to discuss these things with them, having their support when things might be difficult, because it's not going to be linear progress. There's going to be peaks and troughs and it's going to go up and down. But again, having that support from friends, family is going to be really beneficial moving forward. And socially as well, it's just really beneficial to have that social interaction for your mood and all the other factors that come with it. So next, what we're going to be talking about is positive reinforcement and positive self-talk. So positive reinforcement is, again, rewarding yourself or having a reward for achieving a certain goal. So this is really important. This is why short-term goals are quite important as well as long-term goals, because again, each milestone, say for example, we're setting 6-week short-term goals. Each time you hit that 6 weeks, again, it's a milestone, you've achieved it, you can give yourself a reward. So then you know that, okay, in another 6-week time, this is now what I'm trying to achieve. Let me set a new goal. And then after each 6-week period, once you've achieved that milestone, it's going to keep you motivated through that period of time, because you're more likely to want to achieve that goal, because then you get that reward, get that positive reinforcement at the end of it to help you with that. And again, this is why tracking progress is so important. If you're not tracking progress, it's more difficult to tell when you're achieving your goals or not, because you haven't got that objective measure to analyze and read and to keep progressing, essentially. And again, the next thing I wanted to touch on was positive self-talk and avoiding negative self-talk. So again, a lot of our motivation, a lot of what we want to achieve comes from how we talk to ourselves, how we think about ourselves, and how we essentially, as I said, talk to ourselves when we're doing certain things. So again, if you're constantly thinking negatively, again, it is really difficult, but if you're constantly thinking negatively about things, it's going to be less likely that you're going to achieve them goals. Constantly understanding that, saying to yourself, look, this thing was out of my control, I wasn't able to go today, but again, I've stuck to the plan completely so far, this one day has just come out of nowhere and I can't do anything about it. And understanding that, rather than saying negative things about yourself and putting yourself down for not going to the gym that day, for trying to reach your goal that day, having that positivity and having that positive self-talk can really keep you on track. Because again, it's very easy to want to completely fall off as soon as you have one bad day. But again, trying to keep that positive self-talk up can be really helpful to stick to your goals. And finally, what I wanted to touch on was self-care. So again, it's quite underlooked when looking at setting goals, because if you're not looking after yourself, you're not providing yourself self-care, you're not giving yourself enough rest, it's going to be very difficult to stick to that goal. It's going to be very easy to burn out. So again, allowing yourself time to rest and recover is just as important as the goal that you're setting. Say, for example, as I said before, you have your routine, you have your diary, you've got your habit set in place for the week. What you also want to make sure is that you've got your rest and recovery times in there as well. Because if you haven't, then it's going to be a lot more difficult to stick to it, because you're going to constantly feel like you're working, you're going to feel tired, you're going to feel fatigued, you might burn out. So again, it's really important that you're looking after yourself, you're allowing yourself time to rest and recover. And if these times are in your diary, in your schedule, then you're going to really know that, look, before I'm allowing myself to rest and recover, I'm going to train really hard, I'm going to really strive to reach my goal. And after that, I know that I've got a good rest. Think about what you're going to do. Say, for example, you want to chill and watch Netflix, then you know that, and that's one of your favorite things to do, you know that after the gym session, you're going to work really hard, then you get that reward at the end of it, to rest, to recover and watch Netflix and chill out. And again, having that scheduled is really important. People really underlook that, because again, we don't want to burn out, we don't want to over fatigue ourselves, we want to be able to stick to that in the long term. And as I said, this really helps to reduce stress levels, and it avoids feeling overwhelmed, because it's very easy to feel like the only thing you're working towards is your goal, and you're constantly, it might feel a bit tedious, a bit monotonous sometimes. But again, having them rest and recovery days are really important. And inside of them rest and recovery days, doing things you enjoy is just as important, because as I said, when you're setting goals, it's very easy to want to stick to it for a few weeks but then drop off. Again, when you first, this is touching on a point we spoke about at the start, when you're first setting that goal, you don't want it to be really, really challenging, but you don't want it to be too easy. So again, making sure that you're starting off small. For example, if you're going, for example, we'll use the marathon, for example. As soon as you're starting, you're going to say, yeah, I'm going to run 6 times a week. I'm going to do 10 miles on day 1, 12 miles on day 2, 13 miles on day 3. It's going to be very, very, very unrealistic and very difficult to stick to. If you're setting yourself smaller targets, smaller milestones, it's going to be a lot more of a linear progress, because it's much better to go slower but still progressing upwards, rather than going up really quickly and then dropping off and then go back into the cycle where you're going up and down, because in the long term, you're just going to end up in the same place or only progressing a little bit. What we want is slow, gradual, linear progress that gradually goes up and increases. But again, having them rest and recovery days are just as important in there. And we want to just build on things, work on things to allow yourself to achieve them goals. And again, just to recap kind of what we've been through today, setting short-term goals is just as important as setting long-term goals, and that again can give you milestones in order to reach that end goal. But again, you want your goals to be smart, so you want them to be specific, you want them to be measurable, you want them to be achievable, you want them to be realistic, and you also want them to be timed, as mentioned before. Again, having friends, having support, having peers to do it with can be beneficial. Doing things that you enjoy is really important as well. Holding yourself accountable by having a diary or having a routine set in place to make you stick to it. Again, understanding that things sometimes aren't in your control and you might have to adapt and change, and understanding that's okay, and avoiding negative self-talk, and understanding again this is completely normal, and having positive self-talk to keep yourself going in the right direction. And again, finally, sort of having that positive reinforcement, positive self-talk, and looking after yourself, so having them rest and recovery days to allow yourself not to burn out and to get overwhelmed or fatigued from the amount that you're doing, essentially. So yeah, that's been my Facebook Live today on building new habits and setting smart goals. If there are any questions at all, please drop them down below now, or afterwards you can put them in the comment section and I can answer them. But again, yeah, I'll leave it a few seconds just in case there's any questions. Other than that, today's been the live stream on building new habits, and I hope that everyone gets something from this live stream and they can set themselves some new goals. No worries, Catherine, thank you for joining. again, hopefully people can set themselves some good new goals for the new year. Again, you must want to achieve that. Even though New Year's resolutions are good, you must really want to achieve your goals and have that desire to do that. Otherwise, it's going to be really difficult to stick to that. But anyway, I'll leave it for a couple more seconds. Any questions, please let me know. Perfect. Thank you for watching, everyone. I'll see you in the next one.